fantastic speech, and before I begin, I want to make something that I can do this because Bill thanked a lot of you, and I'm going to skip some of that. But I want to make it very clear to folks that while we certainly appreciate all the great fundraising work that Craig Canton has done for us, he is not our party's Mike Duffy, and the $90,000 you asked about in the fundraising budget did not go to the person who helped us raise the money. Thank you, Craig. I want to thank the team here in Oshawa for the fantastic work you've done. And I know you've been thanked many times, but I think you deserve another round of applause for the great work you've done. And I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I'm getting sick and tired of coming to the Durham region. In the last 2 years, I've been to Durham to speak out against an incinerator, I think 3 or 4 times. I've been to this region twice, maybe 3 times now, to testify at the Kangaroo Court, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. I've been here to speak out against the ethanol plant in Oshawa Harbor that the mayor talked about last night. And now, thanks to Lois, one of our longtime activists, I'm going to be here in the region speaking out against the Pickering Airport. And I just want to say to the poor folks of Durham region, you really need the Green Party. I want to acknowledge today that we are on the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Scugog First Nations, and that yesterday was National Aboriginal Day. And I'm going to be critical of our Premier, but right now I want to actually thank her for the words she said yesterday when she said that she wanted to make solving land claims and reaching out to our First Nations brothers and sisters one of her top priorities. Because I think that's long overdue in this country and in this province. And she will have my bipartisan, multi-partisan, whatever support in making that happen. I'm not going to ask these folks to stand up, but I do want to acknowledge once again the great work of our provincial executive, of our staff and our interns. I do want to ask 2 groups of people to stand up who haven't been thanked yet. So anyone, and it doesn't have to be in the last year, but anyone who has served as a campaign manager in your lifetime as a Green Party member, I'd like you to stand up, please. There's got to be a few of you. Campaign managers. I find in politics, the candidates get all the glory and the campaign managers do all the work. That's how it works. That's why I ran for leader. Becky gets to do all the work and I get to have all the fun. Next. I'm actually going to take that back in a second. So next I want anyone who has ever been a candidate, and this could be for the Green Party of Ontario or the Green Party of Canada, to please stand up. My wife and children will attest to the fact of the time and dedication all of you put into the work that you do. And I want to thank you for being the people on the front line sharing our vision for what a green Ontario and a green Canada would look like. And finally, I want to thank each and every one of you for your dedication, your commitment, your passion, your time, and your money. Because without any of that, you cannot succeed as a political party. And the growth and capacity of this party over the last 3 years has just been phenomenal. And, you know, it's not phenomenal because now we pay our leader, which is great. But it's phenomenal because we've established record fundraising numbers, record membership numbers, record staffing numbers, and I would say most importantly, a record number of contacts in our database, which provides the foundation for the work that we do. And that work is making an incredible difference. And I want to give you 3 examples of what a political party with capacity can achieve even when it doesn't have a seat in the legislature. So about a year ago at this time, the province put forward an omnibus budget bill that would have gutted Ontario's Endangered Species Act. And within 48 hours, the Green Party of Ontario generated 4,000 signatures on a petition that I presented to then Premier Dalton McGuinty. And lo and behold, those changes to the Endangered Species Act were removed from the omnibus budget bill. And that's a victory we can be proud of. Fortunately, this isn't as good a news story as I would like it to be, because just 2 weeks ago, behind closed doors, the Liberal cabinet gutted the Endangered Species Act. And in the last week, we've collected or actually sent over 1,000 letters to the Premier saying that you will pay a political price for gutting and attacking Ontario's endangered species. And I'm going to fight so that next year, when I am back at this convention, we can say we've got cabinet to reverse that tragic decision. The second thing I want to point out is that, as you all know, the federal government is on a concerted campaign to attack science in this country. And I think one of the most egregious acts that they took was to spend $50 million to close the experimental lakes area that actually only cost them $2 million a year to operate, and call that a cost-saving move, which is just outrageous. And so, while our colleagues at the Green Party of Canada fought this issue, we took up the cause as well. And we generated, I can't remember, was it 3,000? I think it was about 3,000 signatures on a petition on the experimental lakes area. And when I met with Judith, when Judith and I met the Premier, we said, Ms. Wynne, and that was actually a historic meeting, the first time that the Premier of Ontario actually had a formal meeting with the leader of the Green Party of Ontario. We listed out our budget demands, but I said at the top of the list right now is for you to step in and save the experimental lakes, because we have 2 days to do it. And 3 days later, the Premier announced that the province would save the experimental lakes area. And I've been told by the Premier's staff that it was our petitions and our plea that provided the tipping point in helping the Premier make that decision. And finally, you all know that the mega quarry in Melanchthon Township is dead. And it was because of the activism of not only Green Party members, but citizens and farmers and foodies all across this province. And I can guarantee you, we're going to do the exact same thing with the Dole Lime Quarry in Guelph. And so before you leave, you have to sign our petition to the Ministry of the Environment, because we're going to do the same thing with Dole Lime that we did in stopping the mega quarry. So while I may be denied access to Queen's Park by the other 3 political parties, and while I may have to corner journalists and lawyers in the washrooms and the back hallways of Queen's Park, imagine what we could accomplish with even one Green MPP at Queen's Park. And so that is what we have set out to do, my friends. because I believe this province needs green voices now more than ever. If, like me, you're probably involved in politics, not because you want access to power or money or privilege, but because you think the status quo isn't working. That you think politics in this province is off the rails, and I think it's driven by the fact that too many politicians put their political interests before the public's interest. And that is not what the Green Party is all about. You know, the political context in Ontario right now, unfortunately, is we have a Liberal government that's plagued by scandals, that's actually paralyzed the ability of the province to work. We have Tea Party Tim Hudak, who has a vision of Ontario that's so far to the right that I don't think any Ontarian would recognize what this province would look like if he became premier. And we have an NDP that, quite frankly, has abandoned its principles in some sort of quest to figure out how we can make energy prices and car driving the cheapest place anywhere in the world. And I don't think any of those three options are acceptable. I think they're all about scoring political points more than they are about standing up for what this province needs. And more than anything, I think what disgusts me more than anything that's happening at Queen's Park right now is that we have a government that says one thing and does another thing. And we don't have two opposition parties that call them out on it. And I think the first example of that is the bait and switch budget that was just passed in this province. A budget that neither delivers on either of the things that it promises, prosperity or fairness. It's a budget that fails to close corporate tax loopholes to support our small businesses in this province. It's a budget that offers tax credits to mining companies, but not clean tech innovation companies. It's a budget that could have offered funding for transit. So I'll actually give our Premier credit for having the courage to even bring up the idea of revenue tools. But we had an NDP who said they would bring the government down if we actually funded transit in this province. So it wasn't in the budget. This is a budget that subsidizes electricity prices for the rich, but fails to fully fund poverty reduction for our most vulnerable citizens. This is a budget that fails to even have a conversation about fair and fiscally responsible schools. And I think most of all, what disturbs me the most about this budget is that this budget doesn't deliver fairness for our children and future generations. And I believe we have a responsibility to not only look out for ourselves, but for those who don't have a voice in the political system right now. There is not one mention of climate change in the 2013 Ontario budget. I find that unbelievable given the challenges we face moving forward. And so I believe we need a Green MPP at Queen's Park to raise the tough questions that the other parties aren't raising. And I just want to give you a few of them that never get asked. So why does the Liberal government have a long-term energy plan that completely undermines its climate change plan and will not reach its greenhouse gas reduction targets? Why is it that the debate on climate change has become so non-eventful in this province that when the Environment Commissioner released his annual report on climate change 3 weeks ago, one reporter showed up. One reporter showed up. Why is it that you say you support green energy, but you've limited the amount of green energy, you've capped the amount of green energy that can be delivered to the grid because you'd rather spend the money and put in more nuclear plants? Why is it that we have a government that's wasted hundreds of millions of dollars on gas plants and is now set to waste tens of billions on new nuclear reactors without putting forward an independent review of costs or alternatives? Why is it that if we believe in transparency and accountability, we haven't delivered legislation that will never allow our government to abuse the tool of prorogation again like the McGuinty government did last fall? And why is it none of the parties have demanded legislation that would say never again would political staffers get away with the third-rate cover-up of deleting emails that's happened in the last 2-3 weeks? Why is it that this province passed Greenbelt legislation and then it was the provincial government itself that violated it by building a gas plant next to the most prime farmland in the entire province in a sensitive wetland area? Why is it that we have a government that wants to pass a local food act but refuses to pass legislation to protect prime farmland at a time when we're losing 250,000 acres, the equivalent of the size of Toronto? Every year we're losing that in prime farmland. Why is it that we have a government that brags about its Clean Water Act and then turns around and signs a water taking permit that threatens 25% of Guelph's drinking water?
Shame.
Why is it that we have a government that managed to get all party support for a gold standard Endangered Species Act and then behind closed doors with a cabinet decision gutted it? Why is it do we have a premier who always speaks about equal rights but yet won't take action when one of our school boards discriminates in hiring and 1/3 of our teaching positions aren't available to 2/3 of our school teachers? And finally, why is it that we have 3 political parties that cite the Drummond Report and then fail to talk about one of its most visionary recommendations was that we should establish the principle of polluter pays in this province? It was the one revenue tool that Drummond managed to slip into a report that where he was forbidden to talk about revenue tools, where he said polluters should pay their fair share of taxes in this province. And so I believe we should be outraged that we're being misled, that we're being told one thing and then another thing happens. And I think we should even be more outraged that the opposition parties have failed to call the government out on these issues because they would rather score political points telling you what they think you want to hear than to tackle the challenges that we have to tackle. And I don't want to be hyper-partisan about this, but I think it's essential that we restore honesty and integrity to politics in this province. And I've been told by journalists and pundits and political experts that the reason I will not get elected in Guelph is because I'm not willing to play the political games and score the political points that it takes to win. And my response to that is, before you give me any money, I want you to be really clear on this. My response to that is that if I have to give up my honesty and my integrity to get elected, then I don't want to get elected. I'm not in this to play the game. We are in this to change the game. So this is more than about saving the planet. This is about reinvigorating democracy. This is about a green wave that started on the West Coast with the election of Elizabeth May. And we've seen what the Parliamentarian of the Year, what a difference one voice can make in Ottawa. And I want to make the same difference at Queen's Park. This is about people like Adrian Carr and John Stryker have shown us how Greens can get elected to municipal councils. And this is about Andrew Weaver, just a few weeks ago elected as the first MLA in BC. Woo! There is change in the wind. There is a green wave blowing across Canada, and I think it's going to land in Ontario. And it's specifically going to land in Guelph, Ontario. And if that's going to happen, it has to be bigger than Mike Schreiner. It's actually really not even about Mike Schreiner. It has to be bigger than the Green Party. This has to be about a political movement where we engage people from across the political spectrum who want to change politics in this province, who believe the status quo isn't working, and who want a better way forward. And in order to do that, it's going to take time, talent, and treasure. So I'm going to ask all of you to join with me on a journey that's already begun, a journey that's seen our poll numbers go from about 15% when we started to over 22% 8 months later. A journey that has us within 5 points of the incumbent MPP. A journey where the conditions for success are there. I've had people tell me that the conditions for success in Guelph right now are further ahead than they were for Elizabeth and Saanich at this point in time. But if we're going to do it, it just can't be me. This has got to be a collective effort. And so I invite you to join me on this journey to make history, this journey to change politics in Ontario, and to secure a bright, sustainable future for ourselves, our children, and future generations. Thank you.